I am here.
So Sean, Melanie,
Present.
John,
I am here.
John, Jody,
Here.
Ron,
I'm here.
Jay.
Here.
Hey, Jay. We have everybody. Not only is it unusual having so many people on the committee, having everybody show up, it's wild. And I say that because I skipped last time. I'm not calling anybody out but myself. We'll start with announcements. Any announcements from members of the committee or staff? No announcements. We'll move on. See if we have any public comment that came in before the meeting.
I received none.
No public here today, so I think we're good. Move on to approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes that went out, regular meeting.
We didn't actually.
I was gonna say, wait a minute, I was gonna say, I don't remember seeing combined meeting
That's a
notes.
placeholder.
Okay. Well, as I got into that, I was like, wait, should I say this or should I? Okay, I didn't remember seeing them. Taking a leap on that one. All right, we got a good start. Moving into new business, pedestrian and bicycle crash data report. Which it sounds weird, but I say like, I'm excited to look at that, but not like, you know what I mean?
Data's good. So the data charts are updated, but not the text that explains it. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And I kept finding myself reading the text. I'm like, well.
Just a moment here. Doing. Yeah, the people in the room, do you want it? Which screen do you want it on?
Okay,
I'll make
right
it
here,
bigger.
so I'm fine.
This one?
That one if we can.
So just a couple of, I'll go back to the title page, a couple words of introduction. As Ron pointed out, we've updated this is an update of a previous report that we did, was from a couple of years ago. So we've updated all the tables and the maps, but we haven't updated the text yet. The text is kind of the explanatory part. So when we do that, we'll base it in part on what conversations we have here tonight, the conversations that we had last week with the Bike Advisory Committee. I will say that the introduction will probably not change much. I think that will remain mainly the same. If you're curious, you want to kind of know more about where this information comes from and what it represents and what's included and what's not included, go ahead and read through that introductory part and it'll give you a pretty good explanation. Like for example, these are all crashes on public streets that involve motor vehicles. So we don't have crashes that happen in parking lots or on private roads. It has to involve a motor vehicle, so crashes anything between a bike and a pedestrian won't be covered. I think if an injury is not involved, there has to be at least $1,000 worth of property damage. And that will, when we look at pedestrian crashes, hello, David.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
The $1,000 limit will become significant. It also talks about a couple limitations of the data. I think there's a lot of really, really interesting information here, but we're missing a few pieces. Like we don't know what the rate is of like how many pedestrians are there. So when you look at, for example, like a street that has a lot of pedestrian crashes, is that reflective of the fact that there are a lot of pedestrians on that street? Or is there a safety issue? So the few pedestrians who are there are getting hit by vehicles. So we don't have kind of that rate information. Sometimes we don't have a point of comparison for the data. So it just kind of floats in the air, like, 27% of whatever. Is that good? I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah. So it's challenging sometimes to make meaningful conclusions about the data when we don't have something to compare it to.
I had maybe in the text I didn't read, does it include motorized scooters? Would they be considered bicycles?
Interesting question. They are considered pedestrians.
Okay, but they would be included.
They would be
As-
included.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm not sure, if we'll be able to tell, in the pedestrian data, if it's a motorized scooter or if it's a pedestrian.
okay.
We'll have to see. I know there was a significant crash that happened last year, but that does not show up in our data yet. We don't have access to that information.
My anecdotal observations would
Yeah.
suggest that that may be a trend that it's been increasing maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, they do make adjustments in the crash report from time to time. Like they've added a whole, section on distraction.
Okay,
And so I'm guessing if these things become more popular, and start having crashes, start to be crashes involving, scooters and
Right.
skateboards and other things, one wheels, that may be called out in
Right.
the data. Yeah, yeah. So we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on that as in
Thank
future years. There's a lot of information in here, and I'm gonna say not all of it is meaningful. Consider this a screening exercise. So we're looking at all the information we have available and then figuring out, okay, what's interesting, what kind of jumps out at us, what feels significant. And then for our purposes tonight, like think about that, like what strikes you as being kind of interesting, what feels like it needs more explanation. What can we do, kind of take a deeper look at? So for example, if we have, we'll look at where the highest number of pedestrian crashes occur in terms of street segments and intersections. So we could collect more information on those particular intersections and see, are there particular types of crashes? Are there patterns that are happening that give us more insight into what's happening at a particular location? If there are types of crashes, I'll use an example of bicycles and right turning vehicles is fairly significant. So are there particular places where that's occurring that we can kind of isolate, see what's going on? And then the last one is we have 10 years of data and actually more than that. So we can look at trends across time for particular pieces of data to see if something occurred more in the past and is occurring less now, or just the opposite. It didn't occur much in the past, but it seems to be more prevalent now. Again, just try to get a better handle on.
do
this
you ever
information.
consider normalizing it for like population increases? Because these are just raw numbers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if our population tripled, you would expect to see a corresponding increase of some sort.
Yeah, I think we can do that. It's kind of a rough
Yeah, but just to
normalization.
kind of,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
if you're doing a really good job, but the population doubles, then
right.
it gets hidden in that.
The other thing that we could use is mode share. So how many trips are being made by walking and biking, and is that increasing or decreasing, and how does that compare to the number of crashes that are occurring? So yeah, a couple of things like that we can do.
That would probably be.
Or like if you have sometimes at intersections, you have traffic studies, right?
Yeah.
And could you normalize more of the populated intersections with the traffic study data perhaps?
We can, so we can tell like what are the busier intersections and are those intersections where crashes are occurring.
Yeah,
What we don't have is good ped and bike numbers. So we
Right.
don't know
Yeah.
if there are a lot of peds and bikes use that.
Because our population could double, but theoretically have less
Yeah.
bike and bed.
don't get that information in the traffic study, but
Sometimes we're trying to be more systematic about that.
Okay.
In the past, we haven't had good information that way.
Got it.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts, comments, or do you want to stop?
I had a couple I jotted down, so I'll interject as we go.
Okay, yeah,
Just some thoughts like, I wonder,
let's do that. We'll keep this kind of casual conversation. So interject as we go along, and I'll try to pause at strategic times to give you an opportunity to make comments. So we'll start and we can zoom in on these.
Great, thank you.
A little bit better?
Yeah.
So generally, the color scheme is green is pedestrian, blue is bicycle, and dark gray is vehicle crashes. And vehicle crashes, we include because it does provide kind of a point of comparison. Because we can look at like is there something different happening with pedestrian crashes and vehicle crashes? And is there a reason for that? So if we look over time, this light green line shows general trend line. You can see from year to year that crashes somewhat variable. But in general, if you look at bike and vehicle crashes, that trend line is pretty clearly downward. For pedestrians, it's really not. It looks a little bit more flat. And in fact, if you look at the last 4 years, from 2020, crashes have gone up every year. Bicycles were following the same pattern from 2020, but then in 2023, there was a drop. And then for vehicles, it's a little bit more steady. I can't for the life of me think of what happened in 2020.
COVID.
Yeah, that's COVID.
That's not COVID.
I'll go back to, for the last 10 years, we've averaged 31 ped crashes and 36 bicycle crashes compared to 1,691 vehicle crashes. So as a percentage of all crashes, pedestrians are 1.7 and bikes are about 2.0. Just to give you some perspective that way. So this shows a concentration of pedestrian crashes. It's just kind of a heat map. This is bicycle crashes. We use the same methodology for both. I'm not sure why the bike crashes end up having a lot of brighter reds, showing higher concentrations, unless they're just purely higher concentrations in those areas. And this gets broken out a little bit further in the report into we counted street segments and intersections, so we can get a better idea of where they're occurring. All crashes are given a rating for injury severity, and it ranges from no injury, which is also called property damage only, through possible injury, suspected minor injury, suspected serious injury, and then fatal crashes. The chart here at the bottom kind of summarizes going from right to left, fatal, all the way down to property damage only or no injury. And you can see that for vehicle crashes, a little under 80% are no injury. So property damage, fender benders, basically. And all of them add up to at least $1,000 worth of property damage. When you get into bike and ped crashes, a much higher percentage result in some version of injury, and a very low percentage ends up in property damage only. And in fact, for pedestrians, it's 4% or no injury. When you think about that, this is 4% of pedestrian crashes caused $1,000 worth of property damage, but no injury to the pedestrian. So that does feel like it would be kind of a more rare circumstance. At the other end, the dark red is fatal crashes, and here vehicle crashes show 0, but that's only because the number there aren't 0 fatalities. There were so few that it rounds down to less than 0. It's less than 0.5%. That's what that means. 1% of bicycle crashes are fatal, and then 9% of pedestrian crashes are fatal. 1 in 11. It feels fairly significant. This map shows where pedestrian crashes occur by fatality. So injury crashes are dark red down to light pink, and then fatal crashes are kind of in the green square. Always when we look at this data, there is a certain number of pedestrian crashes that occur along the interstates. And generally the reason is because if somebody breaks down and gets out of their car and is struck, they're counted as a pedestrian rather than a passenger or a driver. So probably these 3 at least. It looks like this one as well would fall into that category. I think the last time we looked at this data, we saw this pattern along 89, which prompted us to write to ADOT and request that a road safety assessment be done along that stretch of highway. Chris wrote that application and communicated with ADOT to get that done. And he's continuing to work with ADOT. It's taken a little bit of time, but they have a consultant on board. They're starting some data collection.
Yeah,
Is that accurate? Is there anything more?
yeah, it moved a little bit slowly in the beginning. It was supposed to occur in the fall of 2024, and paperwork basically got held up with ADOT. They pushed it through finally in the beginning of January, and we agreed that they will study this corridor in fall of 2025 because that has the most pedestrian activity and captures local trips, people commuting, but also all of the trips that are heading up and out Highway 89. So yeah, fall of this year.
So we can take a look at some of the crash data, try to get an idea what's happening, but the information is limited to what's on the crash report. A road safety assessment is kind of the deepest dive that we can do. It's like a really thorough look at the data, what's happening. There's usually a field observation during the day, at night, to try to get, and then there's recommendations at the end to try to get a better handle on what's happening. And if there are countermeasures, infrastructure projects that we can initiate to address those crashes, basically.
Thinking about Highway 89, there was a private individual that put up crosses all the way between Flagstaff and Tuba City of places where people died on Highway 89. It earned, a real bad reputation. And if we were to do that, put up crosses for each of those deaths in that corridor, it would get a lot of attention, I think.
Yeah, it feels like a number of states did that, a number of years ago, that for just that purpose, to like draw attention. And I don't know if there's any ever longitudinal studies that looked at if that was effective or not to get people to pay more attention.
There's certainly been a lot of improvements along Highway 89 subsequent to the crosses going up.
Yeah.
I can't say that it's related, but it's better now than it was.
Yeah. So if we can identify something that is, resulting in some of these serious injury and fatal crashes, then the road assessment will tease that out. And then,
You ever look at time of day?
yes,
Okay, and that,
yeah,
because that would bet some of those happen at night.
Yeah.
Majority of them, just guessing though.
so we'll get to a data point here
Okay.
that's time of day, and you'll see the disparity with pedestrian crashes. And we're kind of skipping ahead, but I think that might be something that, like, just pull out the time of day crashes and see, okay, where are nighttime pedestrian crashes occurring?
Right.
Is there any geographic component to it, or particular locations where it seems worse? Here's the same map for bike crashes by injury severity. And here, bicyclists had 3 fatalities. You can see where they're located. For just serious injury, you can see over the last 10 years, the trends for pedestrians, a total of 56 or 5.6 per year. For bicyclists, it's 4.4 serious injury or fatal crashes. I'm sorry, the top one is serious injury, the bottom one is fatal crashes. So for pedestrians, 26 total fatalities, 2.6 per year. You can see how they kind of, what the pattern is. For bicyclists, 3 in the last 10 years, including 2 in 2021. Then for vehicle crashes, it's 38 over the last 10 years. And remember, that showed up at 0%, less than 0.5%, because there were almost 1,700 total vehicle crashes. And then we may look at how this chart works. I don't know if that is, it feels a little bit difficult to read to me to see what's going on. But you can see these are on the top, again, serious injury, and the bottom, fatal. And so in green, pedestrians, 5, 3, 10, 6 in 2023. And then fatalities. So this is kind of a bit of a summary of what we just looked at. The top chart takes just serious injury and fatal crashes as a percentage of all crashes. For pedestrians, it's 27%. For bicyclists, 13%, and for vehicles, 2%. So in other words, more than a quarter of pedestrian crashes result in serious injury or fatality for the pedestrian. When we apply for grants based on safety and injuries, they tend to be interested only in serious injury and fatal crashes. So that those are the numbers that they want you to demonstrate for funding. And then the bottom chart, this has always been kind of interesting to me, but it's, if you look at all the fatalities on the roads in Flagstaff over the last 10 years, there were 67 total. Of them, 39% are pedestrians. So of all the fatalities on roads, 39% are pedestrians. I don't know, that ought to get people's attention. It seems to me that
Makes
seems
sense.
significant.
No protection.
Yeah. Yeah, truly vulnerable users, road users.
Seeing the sheer number of vehicle crashes, I'm trying to put in my head, just, is there a way to adjust for the concept? Like, it seems like vehicles are just crashing into everything. And each other, like 1,700 times each other, and occasionally they happen to hit it. Sometimes I hear from people who are like the pedestrians or walking in front of traffic or doing something wrong or whatever, but the fact that vehicles are crashing into everything thousands of times means that that if we could reduce the number of vehicles crashing into things, that would possibly by definition include some of the pedestrians. I feel like sometimes when I talk about this issue with other people, they just bring up, oh, these reckless pedestrians and reckless bicycles. And yet that's an awful lot of vehicles hitting other vehicles, even really large visible objects like other vehicles. And so there's no statistical way I can think of like saying that, but just the sheer volume of vehicles hitting other vehicles seems like, boy, if we could get them to stop hitting things, pedestrians would have a side benefit to that.
Yeah, I guess maybe a couple of comments in the introduction. It talks about the language that people use around this safety information, and the FHWA or NHTSA a number of years ago went from using the term accident to crash on the idea that crashes, you can identify a cause. They're avoidable. There's a cause usually. And if you can identify the cause, you can do something perhaps to help avoid them. Yeah. So that's part of, versus an accident is like, your elbow, you knock your glass of milk over. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing is that FHWA and a number of other agencies are promoting what's called the Safe Streets approach, or Vision Zero, or the Road to Zero. There's a number of forms it takes. And the idea is that there can be systematic changes that can be made that reduce the number of crashes that occur, and reduces the severity of crashes that do occur. So they kind of acknowledge that crashes will happen, but they can be reduced. The severity can be reduced as well.
That will be exciting, like at Lone Tree or some of the new Butler ones, or I mean, it'd be neat. If that is shown, then hopefully there's a lot of reason to expand those techniques.
Yeah. So here, this chart shows ages of pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. And then the very bottom is how the age categories break down for Flagstaff at large. So we have a point of comparison to see if things kind of match up. For drivers, of course, there's going to be a very small percentage under at 17 and under, because I think you have to be 16 to get a driver's license. I don't know that there's too much interesting here. It does seem that pedestrians who are in crashes skew a little bit older. Like you can see the top two categories, 45 to 64, 65 and above are higher percentages than the city as a whole. And bikes skew a little bit younger generally. I think if something really jumped out at us, this might be a piece of information that kind of tells us what demographic to work on or to target.
Pretty noisy data.
Sorry.
Kind of noisy data, like it's, yeah, there's not a great trend line in any of that.
I would think you'd have more in the 18 to the light green one, just because of the campus.
Yeah, that percentage.
Should blame everything on the students usually.
Small age range.
I don't know, it doesn't look like it.
Well, I worked it.
Blame it on the middle-aged
Yeah.
age group according to that.
Yeah, apparently the problem is not the, yeah.
But that's a 20-year window. I mean, there's like there's like 4 different variables going on there. So you're saying that a 2-decade age range is comparable approximately to a 6-year age range. But it's a university town, so then it's like, that skews it. And then the upper, yeah, I find the age things very difficult to do. Once you start saying we're comparing this set of 2 decades for people to this set of 5 years or whatever.
I'm feeling safer now that I'm 65. Keep riding, I'll be safe.
Get out of that. Soon to get out of that.
Maybe
light blue
misinterpreting.
category. I will say, part of the screening exercise is looking at some of the conceptions that we hold and seeing if they are actually misconceptions that we hold. Like it's pedestrians' fault, it's out-of-town drivers, it's students. Can we find data that proves or disproves those notions? Interesting part of this. So the other part is gender. And again, we have pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers, and then all of Flagstaff. And you can see bicyclists skew pretty heavily male. Pedestrians also skew male, but less so. Drivers skew a little bit male. I'm going to skip to the maps here. So we break it down geographically. And in this case, the size of the green circle indicates how many crashes there were in different parts of the city. So here's Central South and the east part of town. See the most pedestrian crashes. If we skip ahead, that pattern more or less holds for bike crashes as well as vehicle crashes. So one might make the argument that the number of crashes is related to activity, but I think that there may be something different going on when you look at kind of the downtown area versus like the east side and sunny side. So we see more pedestrian crashes over there, but I'm not sure that we could say there's more pedestrian activity over here. Maybe. Any thoughts?
Because the speed limits are lower downtown.
That could be,
Yeah.
there's less likely to be crashes in the first place. And then really, many of the other neighborhoods, West has 58, but a lot of the other ones don't have only a handful of crashes.
I mean, what about density of roads and pathways? That's like another, maybe correlates with activity, but the area has more going on in it to begin with, potentially.
Yeah, I think that could explain a lot of it. And then the other way to look at it is a little bit more aggregated. So we use this, is another geography that defines the core area, which is downtown up through FMC, all the way down through Woodlands Village and campus. We consider the core, then the rest of the city and the rest of the region is all the outlying communities. And we use this geography for crashes because we also use it for when MetroPlan does the travel diary survey. So they look at travel patterns based on this geography. So we use the same thing for crashes to see if anything correlates that way. So here we can see that most crashes for pedestrians are in the core, but a pretty decent numbers in the rest of the city as well. And then only 25 in the rest of the region. And just for point of reference, we don't include the rest of the region in all of our other analyses on crashes. We just limit it to the city. For this particular one, we've included it. Bikes is somewhat similar, but they're more in the core and fewer in the rest of the city. And then very few in the rest of the region, only 8. And then for vehicle crashes, actually fewer in the core and more in the rest of the city, and probably a higher number in the rest of the region. Crashes on campus. So just in terms of absolute numbers, there were 20 pedestrian crashes, 20 bicycle crashes, and 273 vehicle crashes in that 10-year period. So that's 6%, 6%, and 87%. And then if you look at crashes on campus as a percentage of crashes citywide, pedestrians are 6.6%. So in other words, 6.6% of pedestrian crashes in Flagstaff are on the NEU campus. 5.6% of bike crashes and 1.6% of vehicle crashes. Probably a reflection of like really high volume of pedestrian and bike activity on campus. There's probably more peds and bikes than vehicles at times. The other geographic analysis that we do is related to target neighborhoods. Flagstaff has 4 target neighborhoods. They generally have applicability when we talk about housing and some housing programs, but we use them here as well. The 4 target neighborhoods are Sunnyside, Southside, Plaza Vieja, and Pine Knoll. And you can see in the bottom chart, 20% of vehicle crashes happen in those 4 neighborhoods, 30% of bike crashes, and 26% of pedestrian crashes. We look at it in kind of map form. Here's ped crashes. So 34 on Southside and 36 in Sunnyside, and smaller numbers in Plaza Vieja and Pine Knoll. Compare that to bike crashes. So 52 in Southside, 31 in Sunnyside. So there's a fairly high occurrence of pedestrian crashes in Sunnyside. I mean, I think that was reflected in the previous set of maps that go by district. I mean, Sunnyside is a big part of that east area, and there's a decent number of crashes. One more thing we can look at is when we get to the streets and intersections to see what how that geographically plays out and what pops up in Sunnyside and these other neighborhoods. But here it is. So I'm going to skip to the maps. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. So this shows pedestrian crashes by segment, the linear features, and by intersection, which is the round features. And the numbers indicate the total number of crashes over that 10-year period. So as always, what jumps out at us is Milton Road is here. See, one of the higher crash intersections is Reardon and Milton. And then the corridors have a number of crashes as well. Here's Sunnyside. So 2 intersections in Sunnyside have at least 3. Cedar and West and Cedar and 4th. And then the north half of the 4th Street corridor had 3 crashes as well. And then here's kind of, this is a little bit south of that Highway 89 corridor, but there's an intersection that's Fanning and Route 66, and then here's Marketplace, Highway 89. And then the other thing that kind of jumps out at me is Woodlands Village has had 3 crashes at Beulah, 3 along kind of the part of the road in front of Walmart, And then 6 crashes each at, this is Forest Meadows. And this is University. So I don't remember kind of seeing that in past data. Could be part of it. And then this shows the actual road. So here's this table. Shows the intersections. I'm sorry, this is the segments. Sorry, it's a little bit slow. Here's the intersection. So Milton Reardon at 8, and then the 2 along Woodlands at 6, like Mary Beulah University Heights at 6. So we have the same set of data for bike crashes. And here I think Milton is really kind of highlighted. At one time we had done the number of percentage of bike crashes in Flagstaff that occur in the Milton corridor. And it's kind of a shocking number. But it tells us where we might focus our efforts. For bike crashes, San Francisco and Butler shows up as the highest number. I'm not sure why. I mean, I know a lot of bikes go through there. We have to dig deeper into that to see what's actually happening. I know it's heavily used, but there must be something else going on.
That's not where the bike party, that was
Couple
Beaver.
months
right.
Yeah.
Going south.
I was almost at there once, but it was kind of a weird one-off thing where someone was wanting to turn, there's 2 lanes that go northbound. And I was wanting to go northbound and I was in the right-hand lane, and the person in the left-hand lane was waiting for a pedestrian, or they were waiting for a person in front of them who was waiting for a pedestrian. And so they just veered straight into my lane while I was in it to get around that person. So I don't picture that that's actually what's going on most of the time. It was just this weird thing where suddenly a car was aiming right at me. Yeah, but I don't know. I used to go through that intersection every day when I was coming home from work, and I didn't like it, but I couldn't speak to what would be the actual cause of that. What the most likely conflict was.
Yeah, I ride that quite a bit and it seems pretty safe. Yeah, feels
It's
safe.
a rail ball intersection.
And it's,
Signalized.
Traffic's fairly slow.
It's hard to turn left if you're going west on Butler, and turn left on San Francisco. People like, yeah,
I've just seen quite a few vehicle crashes with that turning
Yeah.
movement.
So we can isolate those 9 crashes. Pull what we can from the crash data to see if there are particular, directions of travel or types of crashes that are occurring. If we want to dig deeper into it, we can ask the police department to provide those 9 crash reports, and then we can get really detailed description of what's happening. And then we can see is it a particular movement? What exactly is there anything that is common among those 9 crashes that points to something?
speaking of, yeah, that bike party incident though was at Butler and Beaver, and there's only 3
crashes, yeah, so that the bike
separate incidents, so that's counted as one incident.
none of this one.
That's what, okay, I was missing.
Or there's a number 8 at the road whose name Parkway, Ponderosa Parkway, or what is the?
Ponderosa Parkway, yes.
And a fewer number of pedestrian ones for now, but they're putting in all of those pedestrian condos that are likely to hold pedestrians. And they talk about how great it is that there's a bus stop right there, but that's such a horrible place for bikes and pedestrians because of the right turning people across there. And so I can't imagine that we're not going to get more ped interactions there, because it's just really hazardous anytime you're coming from like anyway, there's a couple of orientations where the right turning drivers just don't even consider that there might be somebody in the crosswalk. And most of the time I'm nimble enough on my bike, but the thought of all the kids in those condos coming down to ride the bus is just scary. Although they can't probably afford the condos anyway, so, I mean, families probably can't afford them now anyway, so maybe there are no children involved. But there's a bus stop right, was a bus stop right near there for people to try to access if they were safe enough.
We'll look at that intersection as well to see if there's anything that jumps out at us. Last map is kind of a combination, so we can see where both things are happening. And again, Milton Road. The intersection we just talked about had 9 total crashes, but that only means there was 1 pedestrian crash. Most of them were cyclists. And then kind of a cluster down here at intersections. Then we get into a bunch of different pieces of information. We can go through these relatively quickly. This is by weather conditions. And really not surprisingly, there are fewer pedestrian crashes and bicycle crashes when the weather is bad. Just fewer bikes and peds out. Here's the one we were talking about before by lighting. So green is during daylight, gray is dawn or dusk, and blue is dark. So for vehicles, 21% in the dark, for bicycles, 14%, and for pedestrians, 38%. So significantly higher number for pedestrians. We can isolate that 38% of pedestrian crashes and see where they're occurring, if there are any hotspots. By surface condition, we aggregated into the surface is dry. It's wet in some manner or other. There's a handful. And again, I think this is kind of a reflection of weather as well, but not as many bike and ped crashes when the street is wet or icy or snowy. Just not that coordinated when it comes down to it. Here's crashes by month. Pedestrians seem to kind of match the pattern for vehicles, and then bikes have kind of a different pattern altogether. So this is kind of curious, and I think we could pull maybe the August, September, and October crashes and see if there's a locational component to that. One guess would be that might be occurring around campus. It's
That'd be
the
my
result of students coming back.
learning how to get around on a bike.
January spike. Any ideas or just,
New Year's Eve.
And one potential explanation is that, I'm sorry, did you just say this again?
New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, yeah.
Yeah, line cut drop, yeah.
I wasn't gonna say that.
I mean, that's just a,
It doesn't really hold for
Oh,
the
it's
summer, but in the winter it gets darker earlier. So if pedestrians are walking home, like after a shift, and they're walking in the dark. That doesn't hold for here in December. Time of day, bike crashes kind of track with vehicle crashes in that the peak is between 3 and 6. Pedestrian crashes are a little bit later. So this feels like it's part of the nighttime crashes that occur in dark. So to me, it must mean it feels unlikely that there may be more pedestrians at that time of day, but the pedestrians who are out are walking in darkness. So that kind of indicates that there's a problem with.
in our neighborhood, there's a lot more at that time of day.
Yeah, well, there is people walking after work.
Yeah, but I don't know that those aren't the intersections that you're talking about. These are just the people going for their evening walk. intentionally avoiding busy streets, and so I don't think it's.
I don't know if we can, if there's a way to get like why that happens, but.
I was kind of wondering if most of the, if recreational walking is as hazardous as walking to get somewhere, because walking to get somewhere, you're heading through all of those busy intersections, and those are all the intersections any person walking for enjoyment would avoid like the plague, so.
Day of week, there's kind of a weekend drop for for bicycle and vehicle crashes. That doesn't really occur as much with pedestrian crashes. Now we get into a little bit of some of the roadway factors. One thing we look at is the crash related to an intersection? So in the data, we break it out by its intersection related. It occurs in a segment, like on the through roadway. It's at a driveway or alley, or it's at an interchange of one of the interstates. And then for the graph, we should probably relabel this, but this is the combination of intersection, driveway, or alley, and interchange. So kind of junction related. In other words, you can see for pedestrians, 60% of crashes occurred in intersection. For bikes, 57%. So that's kind of where the action is. Traffic control information is a little bit nuanced, I think, but traffic control is a signal, like a traffic signal, stop signs, something else, a yield sign, flaggers, and then uncontrolled means that you have no traffic control in the direction that you're proceeding. So for the pedestrian, 55% had no control. They weren't at a stop sign or a traffic signal. For drivers in pedestrian crashes, it was 47% uncontrolled and then 41% at a signalized intersection. Again, this is a little bit nuanced. I'm not sure what this tells us or if there's really anything that we can do with it. We have the same information for cyclists, which kind of tracks with the same general percentages. Functional class, we need to update this information, but I imagine it will be similar. So most head bike and in fact vehicle crashes happen at minor arterials and major collectors, so on higher level, bigger, faster, busier streets. Very few happen at residential locals. The unsatisfying part of this information is we don't know how this relates to how many people are using those. Like we know for vehicles, there's a lot more vehicles that use higher level roads, but what can we say about pedestrians and bikes? The next section is as fault and violation. And for fault, when an officer fills out a crash report, they indicate which of the parties involved in the crash was most at fault in their opinion or in their professional judgment or whatever. And there's always somebody who's most at fault, somebody who's less at fault in every crash. And so we can use that information to see kind of where blame lies, if you will. I don't know a good way to put it. But here are the results. So in pedestrian crashes, in 42%, the pedestrian was deemed most at fault, which means that in 58%, the driver was most at fault. And in bicycle crashes, it's even a bit more pronounced. Almost 2/3 of drivers were at fault versus 35% of bicyclists at fault. So this speaks to the conception that is it always the bicyclist's fault or the pedestrian's fault when they're in the crash, and the data says otherwise. I think it reinforces if we embark on a safety campaign, like just targeting pedestrians or just targeting bicyclists means we're missing more than half of the crashes, the causes of crashes. So it's kind of shared responsibility between drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists to be safe. And this is kind of a similar information, maybe a different way of looking at it. For pedestrians in pedestrian crashes, 47% were deemed to have no improper actions. They didn't do anything wrong. And 44% did something wrong that contributed to the crash. And for drivers, similar, but 44% had no improper action, 42% had some kind of violation. And when there were violations, these are some of the details. So for pedestrians, and violation in this context is something that in the officer's judgment, that party did that contributed to the crash. It doesn't necessarily mean they violated the law, because some of these things aren't violations of the law, but they may have contributed to the crash. So for pedestrians, 55% did not use crosswalk. 20% failed to yield right of way, and then smaller percentages for other things. For drivers, 71% failed to yield the right of way, 9% speed too fast for a condition. I find maybe we just need to understand a little bit better what failed to yield right of way means, but I find it kind of unsatisfying as an explanation for what happened.
A strip of white paint doesn't necessarily protect you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that did not use crosswalk can mean that there was a crosswalk a quarter mile away or a half mile away and they weren't in it. I mean,
think that's,
it could be an infrastructure failure as,
Yeah, I was gonna
or
say,
it could be that they.
Not a marked crosswalk, or is it that they
Right.
were like in the middle of the block?
I think it's more the latter. They were in
Yeah,
the middle of the
hopefully.
block.
It's
Yeah.
just the
Hopefully.
convenience. They're like, I could go there, but I'm going straight across.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there.
Yeah.
But since so many people believe it's not a crosswalk if there's not white paint on the ground, I didn't know if they.
Of course, if
I
you
would
get
be
in
surprised
there,
if some police did that too.
For bicyclists, we have the same information. We'll go to the violations. For bikes, failed to yield right of way, 20%, disregarded traffic signal, 18%,
that should be better.
drove in opposing traffic lane, 10%.
The result in crash.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You really gotta be blowing it. Yeah.
But this one, speed
Yeah,
too fast.
Disregarding traffic signal.
I like that on the pedestrian one. The speed too fast for conditions.
Yeah, there's like, so you know,
Like, Usain Bolt, like.
And they see a lead out.
that's,
Trying to make their splits.
Maybe. And then for drivers and bike crashes, again, failed to yield right away is 69%. I think it was 70% for bed crashes. So similar. Speed too fast for conditions, made improper turn, ran stop sign. Whoops. I think I mentioned before, there's the report now tracks distraction a little bit more closely, so we can look at data here. We don't typically include the unknowns in the data, but in this case, it seemed relevant because to get an idea of how many crashes the officer who was investigating didn't know if there was a distraction or not. So for pedestrians, 58% were not distracted, 21% were distracted, and 21% is unknown.
Would that be like listening to music or something like that?
Yeah, we'll go back to the instructions for filling out the crash report and get a closer idea of what that is, but I think it's all those things potentially.
Cause I see that a lot still. They're just some pedestrians in their own world.
Yeah, yeah. So for drivers in pedestrian crashes, the numbers are very similar. Is this interesting?
Yeah.
Is this significant?
Unexpected for me. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah. So we could take, it'll be a little bit tricky, but we could take the percentage of pedestrians who are distracted and track that over time to see if that is changing. It's only 68 pedestrians, so it may not be meaningful information, but we can try.
Is there a self-reporting element to that? Like,
I think there is.
yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't even really mean it sarcastically, like, it's just the kind of thing that you might just what really happened when the police officer arrived. So I wonder how accurate. This is my misconception, is that everyone's distracted.
Is that what?
My misconception is that everyone is distracted by their phones and their,
Actual number may be higher.
yeah.
And then we'll have to look at the definition of distraction as well to see what that.
Since distracted pedestrianing isn't a crime, they might be more likely to just say, oh, I was looking at my phone or something, or whereas distracted driving very much is a crime. And so I would think that those people could be screening what they're saying a lot more vigorously than someone just saying,
Maybe,
I was walking along, checking my phone.
Skip to bicycles, and here the numbers are very similar. I'm having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around 20% of bicyclists are distracted,
Yeah. That could be headphones.
Headphones.
Yeah.
reaching for a water.
I know it's
bottle,
illegal in California to wear
to wear
headphones.
headphones, yeah. But nothing, I mean, all the numbers are
Yeah.
very similar across those four categories in that. So again, between the kind of limitations of the data, how it's collected, what it means, I'm not sure we can draw meaningful conclusions from that information.
I conclude you need to be careful if you're out there on a bike.
Don't be distracted.
Being a pedestrian, all the cars are trying to kill you.
That's probably rule number one.
Yeah, that's how I've always approached it.
I heard a thing on the radio a number of years ago talking about distracted driving, and even like if you're a driver, holding a conversation with your passenger is a form of distraction that takes your attention away from
Right.
the process of driving, and gives part of it to the conversation you're having with your pedestrian or passenger. Sorry. Alcohol involvement. In pedestrian crashes, 2% of drivers, 23% of pedestrians. This tracks with data that we've collected previously. And it tracks with like some statewide data that we've seen. I think one thing we might do is look at these 74 crashes and again, see if there's a geographic component to it. For cyclists, we have the same information, and it's low for both drivers and bicyclists. So 6 out of 361 on the bike side. And I think the way they term this in the report is that it doesn't really rely on field sobriety or blood alcohol test, but if the officer suspects that alcohol is involved, they'll check that flag. Hit and run. Our data here calculates it only for the driver, but we can actually calculate it for the pedestrian and the bicyclist as well. And there is a percentage where that happens, where they leave the scene of a crash, but this is the driver data. So for vehicle crashes, it's 10% leave the scene. For bicycle, 12% of drivers leave the scene, and pedestrian crashes, 15%. Feels high.
Yeah, especially since those aren't
Get my car.
true. Yeah, I mean, they're already ones that either involve $1,000 or, I mean, that meet that minimum crash definition.
It was a significant crash. It wasn't just everybody got up and walked
Like
away.
a stunt
drove
man,
away.
yeah. You'll have a roll.
Action before a crash. So for pedestrians, 77% were crossing a street. 10% were walking along the street in one direction or another. For drivers, 46% were going straight. 31% were making a left turn. That seems like a significant number. So again, I think we'll take those 92 and see where they're occurring, if there are hotspots. There are some countermeasures for left turns, but I think like a protected left arrow would avoid left turn crashes for pedestrians for the most part if everybody behaves, and minds the signal, because everyone has a protected phase in that case. You can think of a typical situation where a driver can make a left turn on a green light when it's clear for them to do that, and their attention is on gaps in traffic, not necessarily a pedestrian in an adjoining crosswalk, but that's one potential scenario. For bikes, the bicyclist, and 47% was going straight, and 31% they were crossing, like going through an intersection, for example. 4% they were making a turn movement. For drivers in bicycle crashes, 41% were making a right turn. 30% are going straight. And in fact, we have pulled some of the, we have highlighted these 141 bike crashes that involve right turning vehicles and done a little geographic analysis. So here you can see kind of a heat map of it, and then I'll skip ahead and look at, these are where they're actually occurring. So right turning vehicles account for a lot of crashes on Milton. And you can see there are kind of consistent intersections, but there's also 10 on the through segment of roadway. And I'm guessing that because there's so many driveways on Milton, right, that these 10 are related to that. I think this is I think that's a 6 in the number above it. Beaver, there were 6. Here's a partial answer to what's going on at Butler and San Fran. 8 of those crashes involve right turning vehicles. Again, a partial answer to what's happening at Ponderosa is 6. 6 out of 8 are right turning vehicles. So Jody nailed that one.
Yeah, that one.
Sorry.
See that firsthand, yeah.
And then, kind of along Route 66, a lot of intersections have similar, and I think, these right turning crashes contribute to overall bike crashes as well. So these are kind of some of the same intersections that show up. I'm curious because a lot of these intersections are signalized and crossings are prohibited on one leg. And so when you think about a bicyclist going from the Foots Trail to proceed north on some of those streets, and you can't cross on the side that you're supposed to be on. So you cross on the side that you can cross on, and you're on the wrong side relative to where you should be as a cyclist. I wonder if that in some manner contributes to crashes or not, or if it's something else.
Schweitzer doesn't show up though, and that's the one I think of as being where when I want to go north on Schweitzer, I have to cross,
Yeah.
but I'm crossing on the opposite side, so I have to make the two-way cross, whereas Steve's, I guess Steve's isn't on there either.
Yeah,
So those are both the opposite ways, but neither of them show up.
yes, Arrowhead first, Postal, which kind of surprised me. That,
Arrowhead is one where you do have to cross. Yeah, if you're,
in fact,
yeah, postal, huh?
so I think that's the I think the only other thing on the report is the copy of the crash report. So I think just for next steps, we'll do some of the deeper analysis that we talked about, write up the text part of it. And it'll be a complete report. I think we'll try to share it with the police, for example, other groups. I really think the most interesting thing about this information or these reports is what we do with that information. We have used it in the past, for example, when Chris wrote the grant application for Safe Streets for All, the crashes along Butler for both pedestrians and bikes were significant. It was a safety grant, Safe Streets for All. So that was the fact that there were a number of crashes made a stronger application, a stronger reason to make safety improvements. So that's one way we can use it. We can, target specific things. And if there's an infrastructure countermeasure, we can think about programming it or moving it forward or whatever. If there are what appear to be bigger issues like that stretch along Highway 89, we can do, more thorough review through a road safety assessment, try to find out what's going on, and if there's a way to prevent those crashes. We can use it to prioritize projects, like we can look at foot trails and intersections, sidewalks, bike lanes, enhanced crossings. Do crashes play into that? If we had a crossing, would that make it safer for pedestrians in a particular location? So we can use the information that way as well.
That seems like a logical option. I mean, they all do, but you were sharing the kind of the list of upcoming improvements last meeting or the meeting before, and it seems like you could look at those two things in tandem and say, okay, this one's a high crash. If we made this improvement, maybe it moves up on the list of priorities.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we ought to do that. Yeah.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, thank you for sitting through all of it.
That's good.
Yeah, no, it was great.
I like
It's just a lot to, I haven't had taken a look at it yet. It's just a lot to soak in.
So we'll try to get we'll get it finalized by the next meeting. I think we should be able to do that at least at some level and bring it kind of a final report back for you to look at.
Great, thanks. Our next agenda item, urban trails and bikeways map for portable devices.
So this one isn't as heavy as the last one.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you open that link in your phone, you can see what the map would look like. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little icon to turn layers off and on. And so the thought is, like, is there a way? What can we do to make this most useful for people navigating on the urban trails? At Bike Advisory, they came up with the idea: can we add where we have free bike repair stations? And then we did like 10 minutes of brainstorming. Where are the bike repair stations around town?
Thing I want to do is like make the routes selectable. Like so that, like in ArcGIS, you can click on something with the identify and like a little
Yeah.
bubble pops up and gives you some info. It's like the
Yeah.
first thing I tried to do was click on one.
It doesn't do that.
Well, it's not for me.
Okay, it's probably set up that way. So what information would you like to see?
That's a great question. I just wanted to be able to click on it.
See what it did.
Like on the phone, because the legend takes a little extra work to read through. You could get some of the basics. Like if you click on a blue line, it's going to tell you what type of route that is.
Yeah.
And maybe the name, like the basics.
So you have water on there too. Water and public restrooms.
Yeah.
That's what I look for when I'm bike touring. It's like,
Yeah, I think we have
all I
like
care about.
drinking fountains in parks.
Yeah, I did see
Restrooms
that.
might be another one we could add. Looks like Jay online has a question or comment.
Yeah, just in line with that, just like distances would be cool. So you can maybe plan your route a little better.
Yeah, I think why I wanted to click on it was because I use Trail Forks all the time.
This reminds me of.
And
Yeah.
you can click on a route.
Yep.
And it'll tell you like this information pops up on the bottom. It'll tell you what it is and how long and the elevation. And so maybe a couple basic elements similar to what you get in that type of application.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good example. That's pretty useful for
Especially
navigating in a new area. I know I
Yeah.
use it a lot.
Especially for foot trails, it seems like that would be like
Yeah.
having information on the trail.
And if you want to stay on the foot system, because Trail Forks will take you somewhere else. So that would be useful.
Maybe surface type.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jane, but yeah, just if you depending on what kind of bike you ride, it might be nice to know if you're gonna send yourself on an aggregate foots when you don't wanna be on one.
Especially in the winter
Yeah.
when those
Oh,
aren't
yeah.
prioritized or being cleared.
I wonder if Google has the capacity to do this job for us. You know, when you do Google mapping, it'll tell you your driving route preferred and alternates, your travel time, and then it lists a bicycle, how long will it take you to ride a bike, and on foot. So I wonder if we just gave Google more information about our trail system, I wonder if Google could do the job for us.
Yes, if we, it's the first thing that you said, if we gave them better information about that they can include online, yeah. Possibly. I think it's a fair question. You know, information like that is becoming increasingly centralized. Like Trail Forks, for example, has a monopoly on
You gotta pay.
trail information. Yeah.
My experience with Google when it comes to trails with roads are great. I've used them a lot. But when you get off the roads, they're not as good. They can be good. They can also be not so good. I've been taken down past to somebody's house before. It's not where I wanted to go.
Jay?
Along those lines, on the other map, you could deselect different routes. I think that would be nice. Like you could say, hey, turn these off so it has a little clarity. And then along that line for this, bus routes and bus stops would be very helpful for pedestrians.
Yeah. Like the bus.
Look in there. I know we put bus stops, but I'm not sure. I don't think bus routes is in there.
And bus stops are.
But if you don't know where the bus stop what the route is, where the bus stop takes you. And I did just check, and it routed me, Google Maps routed me on the FUTs going over Schweitzer Mesa from near the Elks Lodge over to Safeway. It put me on to one FUTs trail and then crossing over that wonderful bridge and then on the other FUTs trail. So it did at least, they've got some of that
That's good.
information or a lot of it.
Because it's a pretty established system, so that
Yeah.
may help.
But I always wonder, is it like the tiger census data that used to go up for the, like 30 years ago? That was how information fed up higher, but how does our information go?
Source.
Yeah.
There may be a possibility of this application doing routing information like that, but we have to look into how that works, like to be similar to Google.
And this is just an option to the paper.
We'd have to do it better than Google.
Can you have it be tied to your phone's location? Like, cause I was also, it might be nice if you're going to try to use this application, if it could show you where you are on the map.
It has an icon.
Is it not, am I missing
Yeah,
that?
the little target
It's a circle.
Oh,
on the house.
oh, you have to give it an X, like, oh, there it is.
Mission to.
Thank you.
It might be.
Mine had you have to click that on though. Was yours on automatically?
No.
Wasn't on.
Yeah,
I can press it.
Okay.
How's the accuracy of your location once you turn it on?
Chris is in the graveyard.
Yeah.
I know it's graveyard.
I've been in the NAU graveyard.
Oh, no,
Could be,
it's got me like one room over.
It's
pretty
just
good.
not loading
Yeah.
anymore. Like giving me my location.
It's got you one room over, like from where we are right
Yeah.
now. Okay, well, that's.
Yeah, no,
that's
yeah,
good.
no, it's-
Maybe it might be the handheld device versus my laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've got it on the iPad and it's nice. It's a nice option now.
It doesn't work on mine. Whatever, yeah.
To allow. There it is, yeah.
We're inside, do you think?
I don't know. The connection,
Are you Apple or Android?
it's an Apple.
Interesting.
Yeah. If I can make it work, it's got to be pretty simple.
You'll be zooming with your mom in no time at all.
Like, hey, hang on.
I'm
You
just
can't
swirling.
zoom in on it.
Circle that for your mom.
I bet it'll work if I was outside. I don't know.
a little bit better, maybe, yeah.
There's 10 different permissions like 2 of them I had to make sure I said. I don't know if I missed any others or not. I was going through it through the Adobe and then the browser and then whatever, so to get to it.
It does occur to me, are we working at cross purposes here with the previous conversation we had about distraction?
Hopefully they won't have to add a category of Martin's app
we need
being
a-
an accident, like the little checkbox, another app accident.
Martin
for
caused half
trail.
the back and pack and get hit by a car.
Look out.
I think the simple fact that you can say, I want to take foots, it'll show you where you're at on the trail. That
Yeah.
is better than the paper map.
And it's better than Google Maps,
And
because
that's
it
how
shows
I-
you the whole network of them.
Yeah, and that's how I would use it.
One thing we wanted to do is in the options, to be able to turn on an aerial photograph. So if you get like close to something, you can like really zoom in
Oh, okay.
to see where you are, but it didn't, like you could turn the aerial on, but then you couldn't get back to the original base map. I couldn't quite figure out how to make that work, but
I know Apple does that. It gives you landmarks,
yeah.
right after the download shop or something like that. It's like, oh, that's really useful.
Also for cyclists, but we can put in bike racks. Like we had it, at one time we had an inventory of bike
Yeah,
racks.
that would be
which needs to be updated, but we can do that. And that could even be like when you get to a shopping center, for example. Yeah, and you can turn on, you're really zoomed in, you can turn on the aerial, you can see exactly where the bike rack is, maybe on the other side of the building or something like that, to be able to tell it in a way that you wouldn't be able to see it.
I like it though.
Yeah.
Say another comment?
Yeah, just a question that might be cool along the lines of that Google Maps thing is, would it be, you could maybe put a link on there for each sub thing for a downloadable GPS file, because everyone does use their own native apps. So like Ragbri is the big bike ride across Iowa, and they make it an option to just download the GPX files. So then you could put them in, like I put them all in Gaia versus Trail Forks or whatever. Whereas like I use Gaia all the time. It'd be nice just to upload those on that end and have the Flagstaff Gaia folder.
Yes, I like that idea. Are they always GPX?
KML's pretty common.
KML
Yeah.
works also?
Yeah, KML.
Is there like is one better than the other? Is there a difference between the two, or are they fairly comparable?
For importing into Gaia, they're basically the same.
Okay.
Yeah. You go to Garmin, I think GPX is better. For like a mobile device.
Any more online? Oh, no more questions. Okay, move us on to concluding general business. List the stuff.
Yeah. PAC appointments and reappointments. We have a couple of applications. We have a full commission for the moment.
I'm allowed to go now because my husband kept on saying, you're gonna retire before you get off that committee. And now with what's happened in the last few weeks, I'm retiring. So, or I'm veering out. So, yeah, so you can let me go.
Okay, you're okay with that? All right, so the next meeting, we'll bring the applications and do kind of a review. I think the timing works out. At the next meeting, we will be right before the next Transportation Commission. So we're in March, they'll be in April. So our change in date helps that work out. And we'll say goodbye to Jody. Or just get her back in the bike advisory committee.
That could happen too. The world feels totally like it's open right now.
So
So
go up to the Transportation Commission.
no. Those people are far too serious and they like cars more than I like. I went up there once, or I
To be on there, yeah.
visited there once.
Second one, pedestrians recall, bicycle signal detection. So one of the members of the Bike Advisory Committee has been working with ADOT to implement pedestrian recall on some of the signals along Route 66. Pedestrian recall is simply where you're not required to press the button. The walk signal comes on whether it's pressed or not. So he's successfully gotten them to adjust the signals at Country Club and the interchange. Ponderosa. And do you remember I don't remember the other ones. Steve's, yeah. So he's been really effective working with ADOT.
That's really nice. That's another reason to be in the, yeah.
More power to them. Asphalt foots, I have a map if you want to see it. Otherwise, I can just tell you that we're moving forward. We got some preliminary costs back from some contractors, and it feels like we can afford more than we thought we could. So we're going to have a more robust treatment for more asphalt trails. We have 8.5 miles. We think we'll be able to replace most of them with totally new asphalt. Typically what they'll do is they'll grind the existing asphalt up and then compact it, create a new base, and then put new asphalt over the top. And the asphalt that's going to go over the top is more suited for a trail than a road. I think the asphalt that we used in the past is more suited for a road than a trail, which doesn't make the best trail material. It tends to dry out and crack more readily. So we've done this once before on the Ponderosa Trail along Pulliam, and that was, I think, 7 or 8 years ago that was redone, and there are very few cracks on it, so it seems to be holding up. And we have, part of this program is including money every 5 years to resurface the trails with fresh oil, so we have kind of a regular maintenance, which is the number one thing you can do with asphalt. Right. As well as doing that, like if cracks do appear, you can do crack repair and resurface it, and they should last longer, so. The total cost is going to be about 3.25 million, which we have the money for, either in the existing budget or next year's budget, which will come online in June. Or July. So we're trying to get this all lined up to do as one big project over the course of the summer. The temporary pain will be that some of the trails will be closed while that happens, but we'll try to notify the public as it's going on. Micro mobility share, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Fair.
There you go. Yes, so at our last combined BAC-PAC meeting, this topic came up towards the end, related to a recent initiative between the city, sustainability, engineering, and Metro Plan, as far as revisiting the idea of opening up the opportunity for micromobility share vendors to operate in Flagstaff. We went to city council earlier this month and gave the presentation. I can provide a few highlights from that presentation. Ultimately, micromobility share operators are interested in coming. City of Flagstaff code states that to come here, you must obtain a permit. And this permit was previously offered through an RFP process, but there's no current RFP process open. So the permit system ultimately doesn't exist. The purpose of going to council was to determine if we want to reopen or consider reopening a procurement process for these companies to come here. It's important to note that the goal was not now, like based on what council's direction, we're going to go out and, issue an RFP or try and get somebody, but we're really beginning the conversations around it. That's going to look like, engaging stakeholder groups. I'm sure that will be it'll be a topic here. It'll be a topic at Transportation Commission. There is quite a few stakeholders identified. And determining staffing needs, there's a chance that depending on how much oversight the city requires, we may need to submit for a new position in transportation, which could take the form of an additional transportation planner. A percentage of their job would be to manage the contract with a micromobility share vendor. Ultimately, council was supportive of continuing the conversation and engaging stakeholders. And ultimately now we will begin a phase of that engagement and putting together a staff recommendation, which we will go back to council with at the end of that, process.
One thing that I remember from that presentation, which was very helpful, is that the goal would be to have just one vendor as opposed to 2 or 3 different companies putting their products on the street.
Yeah, that's certainly something that would be easier to manage rather than just opening a permit that allows multiple vendors to come. That would be less closely supervised. So a lot of considerations to discuss around it. And we'll have plenty more time to talk about it as a committee.
Can we share that presentation with the committee?
Yep. Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah.
Okay, I will note that Jay said in the chat, I have to run and take care of one of my kids. Very informative. Thanks, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. That relates to the next one, which is a downtown mile. I have an image to look at of the planned intersection at Santa Fe and Route 66. Do you want to look at it now? Or I know Jay was the one who was interested in that.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it.
Okay. So this is kind of a partial view, but this is Route 66. This is Santa Fe. This is Sitgraves, and this is the City Hall parking lot up here. So currently, Sitgraves comes down straight, kind of an on-ramp. Route 66 also goes straight into Santa Fe as a one-way. This will take and make kind of a loop out of Santa Fe, so there's more of a T intersection. And then a smaller intersection here where Sitgraves is. We're looking at, this doesn't show it, but we're looking at having a bike and ped kind of bypass that.
That'd be great.
That kind of shortcuts that. There's quite a lot of grade, but I think we can manage it. So you won't have to go, if you're on foot or on bike, you won't have to go all the way up to around here.
Kind of where the existing ramp is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I believe that this intersection will be signalized, but only to the extent of making a left turn in or making right turns out. I don't think there's a left turn out of here. Let me see if Jeff is still on the line.
He's
Okay. You can
So-
probably explain it.
The signal would pedestrians going from west to east broadly on the north side of the intersection? Would the signal make it, it'd be, the cars are turning right here, and if someone is would they be going that way, or would they cross the street first? For pedestrians, so you're a pedestrian and your goal is to get over here. For that maneuver.
I'm assuming in a signalized intersection that you would have there'd be a walk signal to get across Santa Fe. There won't be a signal or crosswalks to get across Route 66.
But at least to get across Santa Fe.
Yeah, you could stay on the north side, yeah,
So the right
66,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, there'll be better bike and ped facilities through the underpass as well. But
great.
yeah, so it's a partial answer. It doesn't provide more opportunities to get across 66. So we're still kind of down to, I think we talked about this last time. The next signals are at Butler on one end and Beaver on the other end, because Humphreys doesn't have any pedestrian crosswalks on Route 66. The tunnel should help if you're in that area, but that's a partial answer to there'll be more opportunities, but it'll be you have to kind of make your way, figure it out.
Is the tunnel, there is a tunnel here somewhere?
There'll be a tunnel just to the right behind this building,
Was it like, comes right through here?
a little bit further east.
There. Ish.
Yeah. I think that's it right there, yeah. And then further west, where Florence and Walnut kind of come together on either side of the tracks. So a few blocks west will be the two bike ped tunnels under the railroad tracks.
And the one that's further west, is that an overpass or an under?
It's a tunnel. Yeah, yeah. The grades work out really well. If you go to the end of Walnut or Florence in that location, you'll notice the tracks are well above grade. So a tunnel, it's actually a bridge for the tracks, and then the pedestrians can just walk through, and you won't have to go down. It'll be at grade, which is an advantage. And the same with the one downtown. It'll be more or less at grade, so it won't be like going down into a scary dark tunnel.
Thank you.
Let's see, continuing on, first mile, last mile. I don't really have an update. We're continuing making progress on the plans. The city's capital function is working with the contractor to start planning when some of the sidewalks will be built. We had some significant restriping plan as part of the bikeways, and the city's road repair and street safety is going to be working on some of the same roads. So we will get that striping done as part of the road repair and street safety rather than first mile, last mile. I'll give you an example. We were going to add a buffer to the bike lane on Huntington from Ponderosa to 4th Street. And that entire section of roadway is going to be resurfaced. So when they restripe it, we'll restripe it with a buffer. So that, yeah, it works out well. Serendipitous. And we're still working on some of the crossings and trying to finalize the sidewalks. The sidewalks are ending up being fairly expensive. Did we talk about this last time? I'm not sure what we all covered.
I don't remember that.
Like we knew there was potential for it.
Did we? Yes. We're still kind of sorting out the final answer, but if we really want to do a sidewalk and we have it kind of ready, we'll bring city money to it. We won't just be limited to how much we have available in the grant. So that's a possibility as well. I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Carlton for the next couple of dates.
Sure. Safe Streets for All, Butler Avenue, complete street conversion. Updates to that. Capital, the project manager in capital improvements has been working to issue a official procurement for engineering, design, and environmental. Yeah, those two things, and environmental. That should go live probably in the next month. I would imagine. It seems like it's getting pretty close. In other news, AZ Smart, which so the grant itself covers 80% of the cost of the project, the Safe Streets for All grant, which left the city with 20% to cover. And we, over the course of last year, applied to the AZ Smart Fund and were able to get the $2.4 million the city was responsible for covered. So ADOT has issued an official IGA. It's been through city legal, and it's going to council as a resolution item next week. So once that's all in place, we'll be able to utilize that $2.4 million.
Should be an easy sell.
Hope so.
Somebody would be against.
I would hope so. And do you want to did you give an update on the RSOQ?
Yeah, that was kind of just going for design and environmental.
Okay, sorry.
That's the news on that. You want to take it for the next?
Sounds good. To transportation alternatives, safe routes to school, we have everything's been signed and worked out with the consultant, Nelson Nygaard, so that they're on board officially. We'll have a kickoff tour of the 3 sites next week with them. So we'll wander around some school sites. So it's near Basis, Pine Cliff onto Forest, mostly. That one's a fairly targeted project of just trying to Mountain Line really wants a left turn out of there so they can serve basis. Basically, so that's about all that one's about. And then around Knowles, it's a bit more open. So that's the other site of, we don't know exactly what we'll do, but in we'll look into a crossings and better sidewalks, things like that. So we'll do something. But that'll be the fun part of the design part, is figuring out what'll work best. The next one's the most open, whole northeast schools area, so all the way the Mount Eldon Middle School over to Coconino High School, down to the elementary school down there on Sixth, kind of that whole corridor in there. So Fourth, the north half of Fourth and all of Cedar through there, and Sixth will be kind of the target areas. Again, we don't know what'll come out of it, but we'll study all the data, crash data as one of them, and dig into it a bit deeper and figure out what we can do to improve those. We're actually hitting the ground now next week.
The last one on there is a trip diary survey. I just put it on there because the Metro Plan conducted this study last fall and they just got preliminary results back. I think we're going to review a draft and then at some point in the next couple of weeks, we have a final report. This is the one that tells us like what percentage of trips are made by walking, biking, and transit. So there's some interesting pieces of information. When we have it, we'll share it with you.
The underline doesn't mean it's the link.
It is, but there's, I mean, you can see the previous 3 travel diary surveys. The new ones, the new one's not on there yet.
Great. Last item, concluding announcements. Any suggestions for agenda items for our next meeting?
We'll try to do the crash report. If the travel diary survey is available, we may present that. We've also supplemented that with some other information that gives us a better idea of what our walking and biking participation rates are. So if that's available, we'll do that as well. We'll do the applications, review the applications. I think that's all we have for the moment. Anything else that comes up in the meantime?
Thanks, Martin. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 6:08 PM. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Matt, like 3 months ago, you recommended a section of the Transportation Commission meeting. And I went home and pulled that up and showed it to my husband. And it was one of those things where it's like going through project by project and saying, here's how we doubled the money from this grant and here's how we got the money from this one. And then we got another grant. And so now, anyway, it was just so impressive for like normal, my husband would be like normal run of the